Okay, item 8.3, I'm sorry, 8.2, this presentation, discussion, possible action on an update from the College Station Police Department. Chief Billy Couch will be making the presentation, and I do have someone signed up to speak.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for your service here tonight. We come before you a few times through the year on a variety of issues, but in the first quarter of each year, we try to bring an update just to kind of recap the previous year. So we're going to do that tonight. I'm going to go through 24 and kind of give you some feedback on some of the statistical data, some of the events that occurred, and I always like to highlight a couple of our divisions or units during this presentation just so you can kind of get a feel for those that are out there doing the job on the behalf of our citizens. So we'll cover that tonight as well. We're going to start with crime statistics, and again, we take a large quantity of calls, and from time to time you may hear something in the media, but we'll kind of recap those numbers, some of the major calls, so you can kind of see the level of activity within the city. Going to talk about response times because to the community member, response time is very important. So I want to kind of cover that with you and show you where we're at. Going to cover our traffic contact analysis. Each year we complete a racial profiling report. It's legislatively driven, and going to give you the data on that report. I've submitted a copy of the full report to you if you had a chance to see that. We consult with Dr. Dale Carmen, an expert in the field of racial profiling that pulls the data, completes those reports for us. We also place the full copy on our website. It's been posted for transparency there as well. And then the final thing we'll do is I'll just kind of recap with some profiles of a couple of our units in the police department. When we talk about calls for service, there's two sides to that. You have reactive calls for service, which are going to be your calls generated from the community, things that weren't self-initiated within the officers. These are calls that came into the dispatch center and then dispatched out. We have them broken down into four priorities. Your priority one call is your highest priority call. It's going to initiate an active response, probably with lights and sirens. They're trying to get there in a hurry. Priority two is also an emergency call that doesn't warrant the lights and sirens. Okay. Priority three is a call that can hold, and we sometimes are forced to hold a priority three for a priority two call. So you may see a little slower response time on those. And then priority fours are calls that don't necessarily need a response, something that comes in that we probably can handle through a phone call. From time to time we do respond out to those if the officers are in the area, but we handle a lot of those over the phone. The other side of it is your proactive calls, and those are going to be the calls that are self-generated by the officers on the street. So you have your traffic stops, and you can see in 24 we had 23,892 traffic stops. So we have a lot of traffic activity. We have a community filled with a number of inexperienced drivers in their first few years of driving that may commit more violations than in, say, some other communities. So we do have an active traffic enforcement division, and our patrol officers also supplement that. Focus patrol is what we would consider like a directed patrol, where we have a high crime area or a hot spot, something where we've seen more criminal activity in recent times. We may designate that area for directed patrols and then put some information out to the officers working in that particular area and ask them to patrol that area more intently. So we'll have them check out on directed patrol so we can account for that time and know if we're seeing reductions in the activity we're trying to suppress, and that's what direct or focus patrol is. Community and contacts are just that. It's us building partnerships with our community, and this can come in the form of just citizens in a park, or it could come to doing business contacts and checking in on businesses to see if they need anything. And then there's always a miscellaneous field that just kind of not attached to some other call for service. Response times are broken down in those same priorities, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Our goal on priority one response is 6 minutes. And you can see from this that we have, for the last 2 years, been at our goal of 6 minutes. The The priority 2 non-emergency response is 626, slightly more. But again, that's them responding to a priority call that's not going to require lights and sirens. And then the calls we've held average out to about 823, so that's a pretty good time if we have a call that has to hold for a higher priority to get those responded to and handled within 8 minutes. I think is a pretty good call. And then the last one, like I said, it's calls that they're waiting for a phone call to address the issue or the concern that the citizen may have. So on our crime statistics, I've given you the last 4 years so that you can kind of see the pattern over time. But if you look at 24, 89,142, those are reactive calls that came into the dispatch center, dispatched to an officer, and they responded to those calls. It's about the average over the last 4 years is pretty equivalent on an average. Our murders, we did have 2 this last year. Again, slightly lower than average. Our goal in that obviously is to have 0. But you'll see as we go down, our aggravated assaults ticked up some. And as a result, sometimes you see that kind of activity lead to serious bodily injury or sometimes homicide. Sexual assault, 75, is slightly lower than the average for the last 4 years. Robbery, the same, slightly lower in robberies. Aggravated robberies, 14. These can be a true ag robbery where somebody went into a location such as a bank with a firearm and robbed a bank. That's aggravated robbery. But if somebody commits a theft and injures the loss prevention officer, those can become robberies. And if there's a weapon displayed, that can become ag robbery. So there is some room there for what an ag robbery can be classified as. Those aggravated assaults, it's a concerning number for us. It's up this year to 118. There is some explanation for that, and they're correlated together with our burglary of habs and our theft of firearms, the bottom row. So we had a pretty good series. Us and our sister community down in Bryan had a series of events of gang activity where we were having shootings. And they were having shootings, and they went back and forth for several months, and we had a homicide as a result of one of these shootings. But this group that was involved in that, young gang members, were pretty active in the burglary of hab community, and they were, we have a problem with our community at times leaving their doors unsecure on their vehicles, and that leads to a lot of vehicle burglaries. And you see us push messaging about the 9 o'clock routine, let's lock the doors, and it's helped, it's worked, and we've gotten that message out quite a bit. Well, we're seeing the same thing with habs, and our students in some of our communities were leaving doors unlocked, so we started having a lot more burglary of habs this year, and they were taking firearms, and those same firearms we found were being used in these shootings, those and the ones stolen out of these vehicles. Well, we made a pretty sizable case toward the end of the year, created an organized criminal activity case out of our CID division, and managed to arrest 9 people that were involved in this, seized firearms, and currently those 9 are still incarcerated. So we saw all of that activity cease. So it was directly related to other crimes in the community, and happy to say that those people were arrested due to some real diligent work by our CID division. This is some arrest data just to kind of give you a perspective of totals on what kind of arrest totals we have. We have 3,383 total arrests in the community. Of those, 2,225 were non-residents. 1,143 were residents of College Station. Just to kind of give you a perspective on that.
Quick question on that, Chief.
Yes.
Is that based on the address on their driver's license or the address they self-report?
We typically will take local address first, and then if they are here, say a student has a permanent address, that'll be listed secondary to their local address. So they would be local if living here.
Okay, thank you.
Because we have come before you a number of times over the last few years to talk about Northgate and challenges and inactivity, things we could do to help improve that area. I thought it'd be good to include kind of the same stats for our Northgate environment. In the bar district, in by bar district, just the area encompassing the bars, we had 9,804 calls in 24. I know you guys have talked recently of the kind of the small area plan, which is a much larger area that kind of wraps in that north end of the city. There's roughly 2,200 more calls when you include the whole area plan over the bar district. So the total for that whole area plan, this is just for 24, is 11,955. In the bar district this year, we had 631 arrests. And I'll speak to that. We do a whole lot of jail diversion tactics, things we can put in play to try and not arrest people. If someone's had more to drink, they become a little bit of a danger to themselves or others, we look for someone that can maybe take responsibility for them, and that happens often. We don't just throw them in an Uber and send them on their way. We try to get somebody responsible, and in the cases where we can't find anyone, we may not have a choice without other solutions, but we do everything we can to divert make an arrest in the Northgate area, just from the standpoint of it's labor intensive. We direct transport oftentimes to the Brazos County Jail, so it's time consuming. So that number may seem high, but we probably diverted that many or more without going to jail. Currently, our staff dedicated to the bar district is 12 officers and 2 sergeants. So I want to talk about our traffic enforcement, and with this, I'm going to cover the traffic contact analysis that came through that racial profiling report that you have. Traffic stops, as I said, we're over 23,000 traffic stops in the course of a year. From those traffic stops, we had 8,833 citations that were written, and then 14,942 warnings. Of those traffic stops, most were made with males, most were made with whites. Police officers did not know the race or ethnicity of the individual prior to the stop. These stops most frequently were for moving traffic violations, and they were most all made on city streets. Most of our stops did not involve a search. I think that total was around 600 searches. Of those searches made, most were made on probable cause, and contraband was located in approximately half of the searches. Of that contraband located, drugs were the contraband found most often. And these are summaries from the actual report that you received and what's posted on our website. Next, I'd like to get into our unit profiles, and I have a few units tonight, or a couple of units I want to talk about. This unit is a unit that for me, I'd consider kind of the heart behind our badge. When we get a big case, a really ugly, dark case that needs to be solved, we put a lot of effort into the investigation, into the interviews, interrogation, tracking down suspects. While all that's happening, these 2 ladies displayed in the picture, Miss Sarah Clamp and Miss Annalie Hugo, they run our victim services. So while all that activity is going on, they're there lifting up our victim and beginning to liaison early on with that victim to get them support that they need so that they can survive this traumatic event as best possible. So what they're going to do is they're going to assist the victims and witnesses of violent crimes. That's primarily their mission. They provide crisis services to the victims. They provide emotional support to the victims that may carry that emotional support process all the way through the case going to trial, always being there as a liaison to help them. They create and provide safety plans to help victims get out of dark situations and sustain activities without that victimizer. They provide trauma-informed support during interviewing to make sure that they are, helping to build trust with the victims because they've been victimized. And they maintain a network of outside agencies that we often use for referrals. And they do prepare and deliver presentations to at-risk communities to help them know what victimization looks like and how to avoid that. This past year, they serviced 424 victims of crime. The offenses supported were assault, family violence, sexual assault, stalking, human trafficking, civil disturbances, violation of bond conditions, and violation of protective orders. And I can assure you that most of the activity of these victims experience in these kind of cases is dark, and these guys, these ladies do a really good job of doing God's work, getting them back on their feet. The second unit that I would like to talk about is a newer unit to the police department. This unit's been active now for a couple of years, and it has really made a difference in a lot of areas for us, and it's going to be the air operations. This is our drone unit. Displayed in the picture is our Sergeant James Vinyl in the center, and then Sergeant Jared Chrisman on the left, and Officer Timothy Grandy on the right. These are Vinyl's the program coordinator. The other guys are pilots. So here you'll see our current fleet of drone in our inventory. The DJI Mavic 2 and 3s, those are the workhorses. Those are the drones that we're going to use on operations on a regular basis. They are going to have a payload. They'll have thermal imagers. They'll have lights. They'll have cameras, and they'll have microphones. So we can use those on a variety of scenes to achieve our goals. The Axon Photokite Sigmas at the bottom, those are tethered drones. They come in a Pelican case. They're able to be launched tethered to a fiber optic cable, and they can just provide continuous intel with continuous power. The DJI Avatas, those are interior drones. So in the past, if we had a burglary of a building and we thought the actor may still be inside, we might try to negotiate from outside, spend a considerable amount of time problem solving to determine if someone's in there. Now with the DJI Avatas, we send those inside. We send them inside. We fly the interior of the building, and we can see what's in there. And if we find that there's an actor inside, we just made it safer for those responders that are dealing with that call for service. And then the newest drones in our fleet are the DJI M30Ts, and those are all-weather drones. We've never been able to operate in elements in the rain. We could not operate in the past, but now with this drone, we have that capability of operating within the elements. Flight missions 2024, so we had 174 field deployments. 38 of those were tactical operations, 10 for criminal investigations, 5 crime scene documentation, 21 on accident reconstructions, 7 public affairs, and then 20 agency assist, or we responded to mutual aid from our surrounding areas. Next, I want to show a video just to give you kind of a picture of what kind of work we're doing with these drones, but I'll kind of set that up for you. Prior to drones, if we had a missing person of any kind that was at night in an area unknown, such as Lick Creek Park, it's happened many times where people stayed late, got lost, and couldn't find their way out. Well, it'd take a lot of manpower to solve that problem. We would have to get people in numbers to respond, and then we'd have to set up a grid search. And then depending on the elements, under certain conditions, we'd have to speed that up to get through that park and find, or any typical wooded area, find who we're looking for that may be injured, lost, or at harm. So that's one case now where we can use a drone. The other would be, say we have a incident occur at a local business and the suspect flees on foot. Well, we would take a lot of resources to set up a perimeter as quickly as possible so that we could contain that area, so that we could then send assets inside to try and locate the suspect that we hopefully contained within a geographic space. That's now something we can use with a drone. So I'm going to show you a video just to give you perspective of some of those incidents. You can make it larger in that right corner. There's no sound with the video. Missing person. Officers in a fairly dense wooded area, and the drone is using a thermal imager to find the location of the subject that's missing, and he's calling out to the officer to give him guidance on how to get there. This was an elderly individual that went missing and was in a pretty bad shape health-wise when we got the call. foot pursuit after a burglary of a motor vehicle.
We've talked a lot about the amount of racket a drone makes in this town, but I'm just curious, does the person fleeing, do they?
They have no idea.
No idea?
No. Now, these are not the size of some of the drones you're talking about, are much larger, and they do probably have more decibels, but this is a smaller drone. This was overwatched just with lighting so that the officers could locate a suspect in a backyard that fled. Again, a foot pursuit after an aggravated assault occurred. See the subject in about the center of the screen. He's going to recognize a patrol car approaching. From an accident reconstruction standpoint, we spent hours shutting down intersections to measure where accidents occurred. There's now software embedded through these drones where they can fly the scene of the accident and then load that into a software system, and it can regenerate a 3D model of that accident location. Same with our crime scenes. And that's the conclusion of the presentation tonight. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Chief Couch. We'll ask any council members if they have questions, clarifications, or comments. Mr. Wright?
Sure. I don't have any questions or anything. I just wanted to have a comment. I don't have the privilege to interact with the police very often, which is probably a good thing in my position. I don't want to, be in trouble too much. But not that long ago, my partner and I went out to Northgate, and we stayed after the bars had closed, and we sat down on a park bench, and we kind of watched how the Northgate unit handles everybody as they try to leave. This was about 2:30 in the morning, and it is remarkable how good y'all are at your job. Not only is there a huge crowd of just unruly, for the most part, people having fun, but still dispersing, but the efficiency and organization to which y'all handle that, and the calmness was really remarkable to see. And I kept laughing to myself because I was like, no one here knows who I am, but I bet they would get a kick if they did know, because I'm just sitting there watching them. But it was really amazing, and I can only thank y'all for everything you do to keep the community safe, especially down in our entertainment district. And hopefully we can get y'all a bigger substation soon.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Chief, thank you. That's a fascinating presentation. Really appreciate it. How long have you had your drones?
Going on a couple of years that we've had them. It took us a little while to get them off the ground through training and getting the certificates and stuff that we needed to utilize them, but they're fully functional now. We've just added more pilots that are in training now. So it's exciting, and it's a really cost-effective way that we're getting the results we're getting.
Yeah, I guess they're housed over at the police department and y'all.
Correct.
One question, you showed a slide about the response time that had, there you go. Over the last 3 years, it's gone down. The city's growing, more traffic. How are y'all doing such a good job on your response?
I think the guys understand the goal. They understand the need to get there, and they get there safely. We made some adjustments around that 21, 22 mark where we went from 12 response beats. Our minimum staffing is 8, so we'll staff up 8 people per shift. In an 18 staffing study, there was one recommendation to consider going to more beats, so we did. We went to 12 beats as a result of an attempt to see how that would work. And I think we saw slower response times because the beats changed and officers were more central and calls were coming in further. So we went back to our 8-beat model, and I think it kind of self-corrected on the response times because they just had a little bit better geographic response because they were covering 1 beat and not multiple beats.
Gotcha. Congratulations, that's very good. Thank you so much for what you do.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
The number of incidents seems to be on a downward trend overall as well. Certainly not complaining about that. Just curious as to how we've got an indirect relationship between population growth and calls to you guys.
Yeah, it's hard to measure. It's so close in numbers. It's hard to measure what factor really changed that. It could be that we're doing more on the proactive side and preventing. Our burglaries went down. Things are trending down in a lot of categories, therefore less calls for service. But it's really hard to say without a bigger discrepancy for me to really label what that is.
And there are times, I will say, through the years too, you may have a significant weather event and you can see, 500 calls or something come in on those too. There's certain years where something maybe significant happens where you can see that. And then we also have been able to, over the last couple of years, add a few officers too. So I think that helps as well. So.
Great work. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Mr. Yancey.
Thank you, Mayor Nichols. Chief Couch, thanks so much for your service and that of your team. Air operations, that's just incredible. On my ride along, I saw Officer Chrisman in action with those drones and was listening to the radio calls. Talk about close control, can just take them right to the suspect. Really, really neat stuff. On your response times, is that measured from when the call comes in, or is it measured from dispatch?
It's measured from when the call comes in. So most of those priority 1s, priority 2s are dispatched as the call comes in. The call taker starts typing in the notes, and the dispatcher has to get those calls out within seconds. The calls, like the 826 at the bottom, that call came in and the clock started, but it may have sat in the queue for 3 or 4 minutes before someone was able to be dispatched to that
Okay.
call.
Thank you very much. And then, I have to ask, and I apologize. Well, I don't really. Head count. Do you have enough police officers?
It's a good question, complicated question. We're at 165 sworn. I got a workload analysis that says we need a few more patrol officers, and I think we've talked about that previously. In our industry, it's getting somewhat more, it's getting harder to hire as many, but we're seeing a lot of officers coming into our community. So I have 24 in some form of training right now. Once we get those out, things level out and there's a little less impact per officer taking calls. But to go off the workload analysis, yeah, you'd need to add more officers.
You have an idea of the number?
Roughly speaking, probably about 13.7 if you just looked at the figures for FY26. And we're consulting with that, or going with the consultant now to reproduce that because it's a few years old.
The Friesmeier study?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Dispatch, how's dispatch looking?
Doing pretty well. It has been another area that's hard to hire and hard to retain. It's a difficult job. We've recently had a pay plan infusion to help self-correct some of that's been needing done, thanks to those that worked on that and got that done. That's really helpful. So we're seeing a lot of progress. Pretty happy with those numbers right now.
Great deal. Thank you very much, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I would simply say thank you very much, Chief, for the presentation and for the work that the force does. I think all of our first responders, I know we have a bunch of firemen in the audience as well, have some of the toughest jobs of any of us. And I know that the police officers walk a fine line every day, and it's a tough deal. So thank you all for what you do.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, you'll stand by for a moment. I got one individual that signed up to speak. They may raise a question we'll need to have addressed, but I'll ask Mr. Alg if he would come forward. He's signed up to speak on this agenda item. Yeah, we do have this thing about bringing bags to the to
No,
the
no,
front room.
I dig that. I just
I know,
wanted to-
I
yeah, yeah.
appreciate you checking, because I don't always read that, but
Yeah.
we did have, a long time ago, an interesting experience with somebody. It
Goodness.
didn't turn out to be bad, but thank you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. It has been 2 years since police entered the home of Mark Hopkins, and he died. The last 2 years have shown that CSPD oversight has fallen short of what is appropriate, and somebody needs to step up. Texas AG has shielded documents that would clear up for me what led to Hopkins' death, but what I can tell so far from what I have seen is that investigators certainly knew that there was no reason to think anybody in the house was dangerous. They ultimately admitted that they had no reason to think the occupants were involved in dangerous criminal activity. They knew what Escobar's truck looked like, and it wasn't there. And they didn't even ask for a special no-knock warrant for Escobar's house, presumably because they didn't expect him to be violent. So either investigators fibbed to the entry team and made them think that this was a dangerous search, negligently disregarding the danger that would put everyone in, or the entry team took what should have been a basic search and turned it into a dangerous mess, negligently disregarding the danger that would put everybody in. My interactions with CSPD in the months following that indicated that whatever information there was often siloed away from the people who were supposed to have it. Several times CSPD indicated to me that important documents that they turned out to have were non-existent. This includes operations plans, internal investigations, and the Texas Rangers report that the city claims it relies on in the finding of non-doing. The records process was a mess. In April 2023, I spoke with Chief Couch. He indicated that he didn't see how Hopkins couldn't have been aware that it was a CSPD search. CSPD documents I reviewed later revealed that the knocking was happening at the same time as the yelling that they were police through the door before dawn at 6 a.m. After 15 seconds, they busted in and deployed a flashbang, which is a device intended to cause hearing loss and confusion. After that, Norris breached the bedroom door with his foot and may have made what would have probably been an inaudible announcement, and that's when the shots were fired. Obviously, there is all kinds of room for someone to be unaware of what the hell was going on. When I met with Chief Couch, his description left out important facts, like the flashbang, which would explain why Hopkins could have been confused about what was going on that morning. I'm still not sure if the dangerous manner the police did this was the result of bad protocols, planning that violated protocols, or an execution that went off the rails from the plan. Maybe it was a combination, I don't know. But I've been given a clear indication that the folks responsible for oversight are either unable or unwilling to do that oversight, even in this case where somebody died.
Thank you, Rich. Your 3 minutes are up. I get your point. I think since this item is under litigation, Mr. Alg, you've used the term negligent lots of times, and that's an opinion on your part. I understand that. I would like to have the city attorney advise me if there's any opportunity to have any further discussion, but since there's a pending lawsuit, I'm not sure What's your suggestion?
Yeah, I would advise that we not speak about litigation at this moment right now since it's pending.
Not a matter of litigation, it's a matter of the incident. We shouldn't be speaking of the incident,
Right, because it's under pending litigation.
so I shouldn't ask Chief Couch, since Mr. Alg made a lot of charges there, that it's his opinion and not necessarily, we can't rebut those. Is that what you're saying?
No, I would not rebut those tonight in an open meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Alg, appreciate your comments. We'll move
Mayor,
on.
let me just say, as the city manager and the one who ultimately is responsible for the police department, that I have full faith and confidence in the work that they do that is incredibly difficult, and oversimplification of their duties is, I have full faith and confidence in the work that they do.
Thank you, and I think the entire council does as well, and I know there've been investigations, and since this matter is in the courts, I think we'll just have to leave it there. I hope the media will understand that while Mr. Al can have his speech, the rest of us are not able to do so. So, thank you very much. I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a presentation by our Chief of the Fire Department, Mr. Mann. That'll be a presentation, discussion, possible action on update from the College Station Fire Department.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Richard Mann, Fire Chief. It's always a pleasure to be able to address you once a year and give you an update on the services that we provide and give you the community a little benefit of the services that we're able to provide to them. For the new members of staff, council, if you have not met my command staff, I have them here this evening. Joining me are Assistant Chief of Operations, Robert Mumford, Assistant Chief of Administration and Support, Chris Kelly, Assistant Chief of EMS is Josh Varner, and our Fire Marshal is Cameron Giordano. So I appreciate them joining me this evening. Since we only get to do this once a year, I've got quite a few things that we intend to cover with you. We're going to go over some response data, response times. We're going to talk a little bit about the improvements that we've made in our EMS capacity, a new response model that we rolled out about a year ago and what we're seeing with that, our fire prevention and community outreach activities, some preliminary impressions from our new shift transition that we made about 3 months ago, an update on Station 7, and a little bit about our fleet updates. Starting with some call volume information, last year we responded to 11,640 total incidents. That's about a 2% decrease from the previous year. And when we look back over the last couple years, we've seen about a 5.7% decline since 2022. Most of that has to do with realigning our relationship of utilization of resources with the city of Bryan, and that's why we saw that decrease over the last couple years. What hasn't changed, a couple things, is the percentage of our department calls that are predominantly EMS. While we are a fire department, we are predominantly an EMS organization. That's the core of our service. Last year, 66% of our calls, requests for service from the community, were for EMS calls. And that remains in that 66 to 70% for the last several years. So that is the majority of what the community calls us for, are for EMS calls. One of the things that has changed over the last several years is where we're delivering our service to. Last year, we responded to those calls. 92% of those calls for service we responded to were in the city of College Station. 1% were in the city of Bryan, and 7% into Brazos County. The predominant majority of those county calls were for EMS services, and as a reminder to council, we are contracted with Brazos County to provide EMS service to the southern portion of the Brazos County. So that's the majority of those. We are currently in the second year, beginning the second year of a 3-year contract with the county, and that contract is based on a user fee type model, so the amount of calls that we respond to the county is what we're reimbursed for. There's been a couple of areas that I just wanted to highlight because I know they've been topics for council over the past year. One is the calls to Northgate. Last year we responded to 808 incidents in Northgate, predominantly being EMS calls. Also, if we look at the pattern of those calls, they are predominantly Thursday, Friday, Saturday between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. are the predominant majority of those calls, which is probably no surprise. It is interesting. This, just to be clear, this is not the entire Northgate Planning District. It is just the Northgate Entertainment District. So it does not include Century Square, North Point Crossing, or Hensel Park. So that particular area is of interest. Looking at it from a landmass perspective, it's about less than 0.5% of the total city landmass, but it's generating about 7% of our call volume last year. A&M, on the other hand, is a little bit different. They have EMS service provided on campus. So the majority of the calls that we make there are for fire. We are the only fire agency that provides, obviously, service to the campus. We've responded to 625 incidents last year, which is about 5.4% of our total call volume last year was to campus. So those are just a couple areas. We're excited that we have been in talks with A&M about some collaborative relationships with them for fire service, and glad that that seems to be moving forward. I also know the ETJ has been an area of discussion, especially with the recent litigation. So we took a look at the responses that we've been making into the ETJ over the past 5 years, or 6 years actually. And we were interested to see that we have seen this increasing trend of calls that we are responding into our ETJ. And so it is an upward trend. It kind of highlights the reason that this litigation or that the litigation and the legislation is important to us, because as we make more and more calls into the county, those development standards in the county are important to us, especially in terms of water supply, street access, construction methods, and turning radiuses in particular are very important to us to be able to provide good response. This just kind of highlighted our most common call types that we saw last year. A sick call will probably always be our number one call type, because it is kind of a catch-all for any medical emergency where the caller just doesn't have enough specific information to really understand what's going on. So it's a catch-all medical type. One that I did want to highlight here is motor vehicle accidents. In 2023, motor vehicle accidents were our 5th most common call type. Last year, they moved up to our 4th most common call type. We responded to 837 motor vehicle accidents last year, and that represents one of our, the first on our list here of what I would consider high-risk, high-frequency accidents. And I always like to point that out to our personnel. You also heard that from Chief Couch, a number of traffic stops, and it's probably one of the most dangerous things that we do on a frequent basis, which is put ourselves on lanes of traffic in front of oncoming traffic. And as we know, we're a community that has a lot of young, distracted drivers, and it is just one of those things we can't take for granted. But that is the motor vehicle accidents that we saw last year. Regarding our EMS calls, again, 66% of our calls were for EMS. Interestingly, also, we transported 66% of those EMS patients to the hospital, which is a pretty high number compared to other communities. What's even more interesting, though, is that of the patients we transported to the hospital, we provided advanced life support care to 89% of them. And that's a very high number. And I think statistics are interesting, but the interpretation of them is more important. And what this really kind of tells us about our community is this is a community that does not misuse 911 service as its predominant medical provider. They call us when they have a legitimate need, and when they have that legitimate need, it most often needs the advanced life skills of a paramedic. And so I think this really highlights the emphasis that we've made in EMS over the last several years, especially in our paramedic training, and to recruit and retain our paramedics. And council has supported us on that, and I think that focus has been right on point with the needs that this community has had regarding EMS care. This kind of highlights the response times that we've seen over quite an extended period of 14 years. And what you'll see toward the end is that that we've been maintaining pretty static response times. Our response time standards are based on the National Fire Protection Association Standard 1710, which is the standard on staffing and response times. The NFPA 1710 standard for fire dispatch response times is 6 minutes and 24 seconds, and for EMS calls is 6 minutes and 30 seconds. And Councilmember Yancey, to your point earlier, that response time is comprised of three different subcategories. One is the call processing time, which is from the moment that the call is received at the public service answering point until the time that the call is actually dispatched to a unit. That's the call processing portion of that. The second piece is the turnout time, the time to actually get en route to the call. And then the last piece is the response time. So of all three of those together, these are the recommended standards. Last year, for the first time in about 10 years, we actually beat the mark for the fire calls. We were a second under that recommended response time and still remain a little bit over that for our EMS calls. But we've been pretty consistent on EMS call response time over the last several years, except for the COVID year, obviously. I put this slide in here to, again, just to kind of highlight especially to new council members, the effort that's gone into increasing our EMS capacity over the past about 5 years. One of the presenting challenges that I had when I arrived here was the anecdotal perception from the field personnel was that we had an abundance amount of time where we were either completely out of ambulances, all our ambulances were tied up on calls, or we only had one remaining ambulance, which, when to put that in perspective, that would be only one ambulance remaining to handle any emergency from about University Boulevard all the way down to the Navasota River, since we cover the county. So that capacity seemed to be lacking. So the first thing we did is we created some metrics and benchmarks so that we could see if the anecdotal observations matched the data. And we created what we called Alert 1 and Alert 0. So just to describe those, Alert 0 is when we are completely out of ambulances. There are no more ambulances in our system. We would have to call for outside agencies to assist us for the next EMS emergency. And Alert 1 means we have just one remaining ambulance, again, to cover that area. So what you see here on the graph is the blue, and Mayor, I was able to add your vertical axis there label. It is the number of minutes a month that we were at each of those benchmarks. And the blue line represents how many minutes a month we were at level 1, and the orange is how many minutes a month we were at level 0. There are no NFPA standards on what is appropriate for this, so we created our own benchmarks, and we internally decided we did not want to exceed 180 minutes in a month of being without an ambulance. And we wanted to, our benchmark for a level Alert 1 was 720 minutes. Now, being without an ambulance for 3 hours seems like a lot, but to put it in perspective, those are, a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there, scattered over the course of a month. They are aggressive benchmarks because that means we said that we wanted to have an ambulance at least 99.6% of the time, and more than one ambulance 98.4% of the time. So those were aggressive benchmarks. We then decided to look at how we were using our resources and are we were using them as effectively as we can. And that's when we realized, again, anecdotally from our field observations, where a lot of times when we were out of ambulances, they were not in our community. They were serving other areas. So we began in, the fall of 21, we began making some dispatch changes and realigning our relationship with our neighboring city. And we started with the low acuity calls. These are the simplest calls, the ones that most likely would not result in a transport. We changed our relationship, and we did not dispatch on those and let those calls remain in holding in the other jurisdiction. That made some positive change, and we tracked that to monitor, the response of that one small change. We added then the next level, and just that would be what we call Charlie level calls, which are just slightly more serious calls. We added that, again, saw some positive change. Also during this particular period of time, our community was rebounding from COVID, and so we started to see those level 1 and level 0 times climb back up. In October of 22, with council support, we were able to get a funding to add a peak ambulance. So we looked and saw what time of the day is this most happening that we're running out of ambulances? And it was predominantly during the day, which makes sense when most people have commuted into the city for work, activities, more traffic. So we added that peak ambulance and basically maintained. It didn't drop things down, but things weren't continuing to get worse. In the summer of '23, we transitioned from automatic aid over to full mutual aid with the city of Bryan. And then the biggest change came in October of '23 when we added a 5th full-time ambulance. Everything else we did was just trying to make sure we were utilizing our resources effectively, but we still weren't meeting our marks. And as you can see, the most significant change happened when we added that additional resource. So first we used what we had as well as we could, then we added an additional resource. And that's what actually brought us well below our mark. We monitored that for four months, and with the advent of that additional ambulance and that additional capacity we had in our system, we were able to integrate and begin a new response model that we'll talk about next. But then I just wanted to point out on here, we implemented a new response plan about a year ago in February of last year, and you can see we've still been well below our marks, even though we are utilizing our ambulances a little bit differently. So it has had virtually no negative impact, for sure. This is our new response model. Forgive me for the simple diagram, but I'm not real good with some of that, so this is as good as I could come up with. Our response model is that we have implemented is basically a new hybrid type model. Again, as I mentioned, the NFPA 1710 is the standard for staffing. That is based on some research by the National Institute of Science and Technology that they did some very extensive testing on crew size and how it impacted critical fireground and rescue tasks that had to be performed at a residential fire in a very short period of time. That research basically has suggested that the ideal crew size is 4 members on engines and ladders. And that was based on the fact that going from 3 members to 4 members was an increase of 25% in efficiency and effectiveness of accomplishing those critical fireground factors. It also allows immediate compliance with the OSHA 2 in, 2 out rule, which basically states that anytime 2 firefighters enter into a hazardous environment on air, that there have to be 2 members immediately available outside for immediate assistance or if a rescue is needed. So 4 members allows 2 in and 2 out to be accomplished, and again, that was adopted in the Texas Administrative Code. While I support 4-member staffing, I also want to point out the impact that has on this community. We have 3-member staffing on our engines, and we have 4-member staffing on our ladder trucks. 4-member staffing to accomplish that in this community would need an additional 18 full-time personnel to accomplish that around the clock. That's in addition to the 24 people that we will need to staff Station 7. So with the financial constraints, that just does not seem probable at this time. And so what we wanted to look for is there another way to accomplish this. Our presenting problem is an EMS problem. We have an EMS need in our community that we want to make sure that we address, which we have, but how could we utilize those cross-trained personnel who are firefighters and EMTs and paramedics to also assist with the fire problem, which, by the way, we respond to working structure fires less than 1% of the time. So we have a big EMS issue. We do have fire issues, and we absolutely need 4 people when we respond to those fires. How can we use the people to do both? The hybrid model that we implemented last year, previously we sent 1 ambulance to every structure fire. That ambulance's primary job was to be there in case there's an immediate victim that's pulled out of the fire or if there's an emergency with one of our personnel. In February of last year, we implemented what we call a 4 at the fire concept, where we sent 2 ambulances to the fire. The first ambulance responded with their engine company from the closest station, and they have their bunker gear, they have air packs on the ambulance, they arrive with them, they gear up, they're now a crew of 5 instead of 4, and we have a second ambulance responding from a little bit further away to cover the EMS activities that are necessary for that incident. This allows us, the increased capacity has allowed us to use this new response plan. I think this is a very creative and innovative approach to accomplishing the intent of NFPA 1710, again, in a community where financial constraints are a significant factor for staffing. So it has, the implementation of this over the first year has been very positive, and we've had some good experience with it. It is not perfect. There are going to be times where that ambulance is out on a call and may not be available. We currently have 5 full-time ambulances, and we have 6 stations, so we have 1 station that does not have an ambulance right now. But as a very good innovative solution, I think this is working very well. So that's what we've been doing for the last year. Moving on, our fire prevention and inspection division. One of the best programs that we have for preventing fires and losses in our community is a proactive inspection program. We follow the NFPA 1730 standard on inspection cycles, and this is the recommended inspection cycle based on the risk of the occupancy. It divides it down into 4 categories: our critical infrastructure, which are our water treatment plants, power facilities, things like that. Those should be inspected on an annual basis. Our high-risk facilities should also be inspected on an annual basis. Some examples of those would be our multifamily residential structures, high-rises, schools, child care facilities, big box stores. The moderate risk categories are on an every other year basis. Those would be like ambulatory health care, light industrial properties. And then finally, the low-risk properties are inspected every 3 years. Those are just your general business offices, storage, things with no hazardous materials or processes. With the graph on the left, you'll see the total number of occupancies in each of those risk categories that we have here in College Station. The middle section represents what we should be getting to every year to maintain that inspection cycle, and the last column is kind of where we were in 2024. I will say in 2024 was the first year since I've been here that the inspection division was really hitting on all cylinders. So it's the first time I've really been able to see what our capacity is. We had all the positions were staffed, everybody was trained, and they were just doing a phenomenal job of getting as many inspections done as they can. That being said, we still see now with them doing everything possible with the given resources that we still have a gap in being able to meet that. And that is, again, it's our best strategy for prevention of fire loss. The U.S. Fire Administration has an interesting statistic that says 70% of businesses that have a significant fire will either not reopen or they will fail within the first 3 years following that significant incident. We've seen that right here locally. We had a significant fire in a barbecue restaurant in the Northgate area that did not reopen as a barbecue restaurant. So we've seen examples of that. So this is one area that we continue to monitor. It's one area that we have a gap, and we would like to continue to look at ways that we can try to meet those inspection cycles. We're very proud of our community outreach division. This is a department that takes a great pride in itself in its interaction with the community. In fact, this evening, as this council was meeting, we have 3 community rooms in 3 of our fire stations. 2 of them were being utilized by different community groups. That's one of our opportunities to outreach with the community and interact with them at the fire station. So we're always proud to have those different community groups join us, utilize the facilities. We had over 20,000 community outreach contacts last year with over 200 different events. Some of those highlighted we trained over 350 people in CPR, over 800 people in Stop the Bleed, and installed smoke alarms in 50 different homes where mostly in the elderly that needed assistance with installing smoke alarms. So we have a great team that coordinates that, but we have great personnel that really enjoy the interaction with the community. On November 4th, we transitioned to a new shift schedule. This was an opportunity for us to have a no-cost alternative that provided a better work-life balance for our members and increased job satisfaction. This was brought to us from the members because it is basically, it's an alternative 56-hour work week. And as a reminder to council, all of the fire departments are able, we work a 56-hour work week, 53 hours allowed by FLSA, and then based on the FLSA cycle, they may get 3 hours of overtime if they meet the qualifications of the FLSA cycle. But it is a 56-hour work week, just like the one that we were on previously. It's just a different configuration of that 56 hours. What we've seen across the fire service industry is there's been widespread growth in this work schedule. It has become one of the most predominant recruiting issues when people call our recruiting hotline. They want to know basically what is our pay structure and what shift are we on, because they're looking for this schedule. We implemented it. We did a department survey in 2023. 80% of our department wanted to transition to the new shift schedule, 75% feeling it would make a significant impact on their job satisfaction. And so we made that change after about a year-long transition process where we really worked through and met with and talked with a large number of other departments that had made the transition, trying to make sure that we saw what any of the pitfalls were and that we could avoid those. We made that transition on November the 4th, and I will tell you, it's been 3.5 months. We're seeing some very positive data coming out of that. We're monitoring the data very closely because we really want to be a department in a university town that is a data-based, data-driven department, and we want to have a lot of statistics for people that may in the future be looking to make this transition. We want to be a source of information for other departments. Because it's only been 3.5 months, the jury is still out as far as being able to present large charts to you. I'm sure we will do that next year, but I will tell you, in general, we're seeing major reductions in our overtime. Our attendance levels and staffing have increased. Recruitment and retention, we are going through a hiring process right now. We've had almost 300 applicants and very highly qualified applicants, so we've saw a large increase in that. So our initial we've seen a decrease in costs. We're seeing an increase in satisfaction. Those of you that joined us at the banquet last Friday, I had several spouses come up at the banquet and were very appreciative of the new schedule and appreciative of the difference that it's made for them and their families. So we're seeing some very positive things from that. Fire Station 7 is still in progress. Later this evening, I think you're going to have the opportunity for to vote on the approval of the offsite contract for offsite utilities. But we're making progress on this. Are basically done with the 95% design and development phase. There's tentatively will be a groundbreaking scheduled in April. The engine for this station was ordered about 1.5 years ago in October of 23, and we expect to have it in July of 26. And that is actually on an expedited time frame because it's longer than that now. We are currently in phase 1 of our staffing. This will be the first 12 members. Those were funded through a SAFER grant. That hiring is in progress. Applications are done. The next phase will be the physical agility and written exam, which will take place this coming Monday. Phase 2 will then be the next SAFER grant that we would apply for. That application, we don't know when that's due. Historically, SAFER grants have been opened in January and they close the first part of February. We know with the there's apparently some issues with federal grants right now. So as we know, those are in a state of flux. So as soon as the flux is worked out, we anticipate the SAFER grants will reopen and we will be able to apply for the phase 2 of our staffing. We would expect to hear back on that by the fall and repeat this hiring cycle that we're in next spring. We also have 7 members that are currently in paramedic training. And that will be done. So again, we're trying to beef up our paramedic staffing before this station opens. And if everything falls in line, we hope to open the station in the fall of 2026. So that is an update on the station. One challenge we continuing to have is with our fleet. As I mentioned, we have very long production times now. This has resulted, it never has rebounded from some of the COVID delays. Engines right now are a 52-month build time from the time we place the order until we receive that apparatus. Ladder trucks are 4 years. Ambulances are about 2.5 years. This past year, we received 1 engine in April. We have 5 that are on order, and I know at our last council meeting, there were some questions about those rolling encumbrances, and this is why I'm to blame for that, because of the long lead times on these apparatus. We do order them not only to get into production so that we can get them, but also to try to avoid any price increases. We know when scheduled price increases are coming up, and so we try to get that order placed so to minimize the impact of that. We have 5 engines on order. We expect 2 to be delivered this June, 1 in July of '26. That will be for Station 7, and we have 2 additional ones that are on order that we won't see until May of '29. We have 1 ladder truck that's on order as a replacement, and that we expect in November of '28. And this past year, we finally have received all 4 of the ambulances that we had ordered quite some time ago. And the good thing about that is all our frontline fleet now has 4-wheel drive chassis on our ambulances. That was one of the after-action items from Winter Storm Uri, because we had a period of time where, due to the ice, we were unable to move our ambulances. So now all our frontline ambulances are 4-wheel drive. We think that'll increase our capacity. And finally, last thing I just wanted to touch on was in a community that is always constrained on revenue, and as the state continues to constrain local government's revenue, wanted to just highlight some of the things we're doing to try and maximize that. We realize that we're a department that consumes about 25% or so of the general fund, so we're always looking for opportunities to increase the revenue that we do bring in. One of the things we've done this past year is we partnered with our billing collector, Emergicon, and we looked at some of the bills, the EMS bills that we were unable to collect, and there were some patterns that we saw in our documentation that was making it difficult to collect on those ambulance bills. By doing some training with all our personnel, we've seen a significant increase, about 20% increase in our cash per transport over the past year, by identifying some of those areas and doing some in-house training. The last legislative session had Senate Bill 8 that allowed for some EMS education funding. That was distributed to the regional advisory councils, and we've tapped into about $110,000 of that for some of our paramedic EMT and the field training officer EMS training over the last year. Our biggest grant to date was our SAFER Award, almost $3.9 million that we are currently in the hiring process for. So we haven't began using any of those funds yet until these members come on board on March 31st is their first day. We received an AFG grant, which is an Assistance to the Firefighter grant, for about almost $224,000, and that was for our active attack training. It is one of the things that we began this past summer through grants that were able to fund the training and equipment to train all our members in active attack response in partnership with our local law enforcement agencies. Combined with that, we were able to get a Texas Department of Emergency Management Homeland Security grant for about $97,000 that also supplemented that active attack training to provide some of the reoccurring equipment and instructor training that was needed for that. And then we received an AFG Fire Prevention and Safety grant, about $32,000, that replaced our fire extinguisher simulator that is used for community outreach to train citizens on the use of fire extinguishers. And then we were able to use the remainder of that grant to purchase Stop the Bleed kits that we were able to issue out through the Stop the Bleed training that we did. And then one that I don't have on the list, it was just kind of hot off the press, we received $29,000 from the Firehouse Subway grant. That was to provide some illumination equipment for each individual in the department. So we'll be working to get that, but we were awarded that grant as well. So again, I know that's small compared to the total cost of our budget, but there is opportunities that we look for to try and maximize the revenue that we coming into the city. And that is the end of what I have for you, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the presentation. I'm going to start with Mr. Schaefer.
I don't have any questions, Chief, but again, as with Chief Couch, I would just say thank you very much for the work you guys do. Really enjoyed being at the recognition event the other night. That was really fun to see the culture that seems to be present in the group. And yeah, I really appreciate your presentation and the work you all do for us.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Yancey?
Mayor. Chief Man, you're a big data analytics guy, aren't you?
Yes, sir, try to be.
I love it. That's awesome. What is the standard for what's a high rise? Is that NFPA that puts that out, or is it a moving? And if there's not a established standard,
And I'm going to tell you what I think, but my fire marshal's right back here, and if I get it wrong, he can throw something at me. But 75 feet to the lowest occupiable floor. I got it. All right, I got the thumbs up. That is the definition of a high rise.
So, sophomore question, can one of our ladders reach 75 feet? I mean, I guess it goes to 100, right?
Well, that's with it straight up at the angle. We typically say, and based on high rises, that, you know, they are not your standard floor size. They have the, you know, spaces in between for HVAC systems. So we usually figure we can hit about 7, maybe 8 floors with our typical apparatus.
So another sophomore question, what happens if we have a serious fire on the 9th floor?
Yeah, so on high-rise buildings, and this is why high-rise construction and the codes are so important for us. You're right, we can't reach them with our aerial apparatus. Our job at that point is we have to fight those fires from the inside out, but we are really supporting the building systems. We depend on the sprinklers, the standpipe systems, the containment systems, the HVAC systems to really control the fire and at least keep it in check until we can get there, finish extinguish and mop it up.
Thank you very much. Has our commitment of resources to Northgate gone down?
Has it gone down?
Your commitment of resources to that area?
We don't have resources that we say are just committed to Northgate, except for home game weekends. We do deploy bike teams down there. We have funding to deploy, you know, bike teams, and we try to put 2 bike teams down there. They have a significant impact on those really peak busy weekends because they're able to take care of a lot of those low-level calls and keep us from having to pull an ambulance into that area.
Thank you very much. Hazmat equipment. When I went through Citizens Fire Academy, I believe it's firefighter Harrington, is that correct?
Yes, he's our hazmat program coordinator.
Program coordinator Harrington. He had instrumentation that was still working off of Windows XP.
Yeah, that's been replaced.
It has been replaced?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, good deal. So they're good to go in hazmat.
Yeah, and hazmat's one that we always have to continue to look for funding opportunities, grant opportunities, and, you know, that's equipment that usually has a expirable shelf life. A lot of those monitors, the sensors in them only have a given shelf life, so there's a lot of replacement, recalibration things that go along with hazmat. But yes, we are the hazmat response team for the 7-county region.
Medical response vehicles that are not a full-blown ambulance. Have you ever considered looking into those? What do you think? I was looking at your chart of a breakdown of your calls. What looks like a lot of them, a vehicle like that would do the trick, or no?
Well, I'll pull back on my previous experience in Houston where we tried that concept. We call it the squad concept. The idea was we put 2 paramedics on very busy areas of town, and the idea was they were making a lot of calls that they didn't necessarily need to transport. So we would send the squad, and then we would send an ambulance along with them. And if they didn't need the level of paramedic care, and again, this is coming from a community where you only provided paramedic level care to about 20% of the people that you transport. We're at 89% here. So much different community uses of EMS resources. And what we really found is instead of sending 1 ambulance and 2 people to a call, we were sending 4 people, and it was tying up additional resources. So while those squads were able to get in service and make more calls, a typical squad in Houston may make 25 or 30 calls a day, whereas if they were transporting, you know, they would be tied up longer and not be able to make that next call. So if you're short of paramedics, and it has potential, but, again, I think in a community like ours where the majority of what we are doing is we're providing ALS care on the people that we transport, it's better to utilize the model that we're using.
Just to add on to Councilman Yancey's question, early in my time here, they had started a pilot program for that. I think they called it community paramedicine. I don't remember what the trucks were. I do remember kind of approaching it the same way. Like, this makes sense to me that we would do this because of the low acuity stuff. I definitely had it explained to me by people who know what they're doing a little bit better. And it cost us a ton of overtime. There are other people currently doing this, and if you actually look at what it does budgetarily, it costs them a ton of overtime. I think just as we kind of talked about, we need more police officers. When we talk about the 4 at the fire, one of the things that is to me is it's not about just like, can we have less firefighters and do the job right? We need more ambulances. So like from a strategic standpoint, obviously there's the what can we do each year in a budget, but we need more ambulances. So I actually think the max efficiency when you look at all that is you keep adding those ambulances. Now we're way down on those numbers, and that chart, I love showing that chart. It shows, I hope people see how much both of these agencies operate in a high level of professionalism. But what it doesn't show is, like, we can stay under those lines, but people are still answering those calls on the ambulances. So what I want to get to is where those lines go away, but also where people have more downtime on the ambulances. And certainly if we thought we could do an alternative model, we would. We've tried it and we've seen other people, and I think it sounds good in concept, but for a lot of the reasons the chief mentioned, it just hasn't worked practically.
Right, thanks for the color on that. 4896, you answered all my questions. Really great to hear about that. Have you seen the number of, since you're a data analytics guy, have you seen the number of automobile accidents, to include T-bone accidents maybe in particular, go down over the last 3 years?
I do not think we've seen the accidents going down. I mean, it's increased from our 5th most common call type to our 4th most common call type in this past year. So the number of motor vehicle accidents has not gone down. Now, I think if you're asking the specific types, I don't have that data with me of maybe the serious levels of serious, and we really don't determine, we don't have like a level 1, level 2, level 3 in serious category that we utilize.
So it's not going down. I wonder if we were to control for population, if you think it's going down or staying the same.
It seems obviously our population's going up. It seems like anecdotally, I would say as the population's going up, we're seeing an increase in motor vehicle accidents. I don't see that it's, far exceeding the population growth rate, but I haven't really dug into that.
What are our drivers' engines and ladders and and ambulance for that matter, and fire administration think about the medians from an emergency response perspective?
Medians no doubt have slowed us down. There are, and in fact, I know in one case when I first got here, it caused an accident of one of our vehicles when they were trying to make the U-turn to get back to the scene of the wreck, and then was hit by somebody trying to go around them on the other side. So it definitely has an impact on response. I'm not an expert on the whether it's slowing down accidents or not, but I do feel like making U-turns in front of oncoming traffic is definitely a challenge, and it's definitely slowed response times. I will.
So your gut check, not data analytics based, but your gut check is accidents are not going down and they do hinder response time, the medians.
That would be my gut check, correct.
Thank you very much. You are doing a great job. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, to you and your entire team.
Thank you.
Ms. McElhaney.
Nice to be at a meeting where it's a big love fest. So I do hate that I missed the.
Well, that was our job. Chief Couch kind of brought things down, and I'm trying to bring it back up, right? So that's. Aw.
No, I hate I missed y'all's dinner the other night. Mayor kept me out in Austin. So, but yeah, I hope y'all had a wonderful time. happy to see that our city invests is what it does into fire and police. I mean, we constantly say that's half of our budget. That's exactly where we well, maybe need to be more listening to you guys, but it's nice to know that we have put focus where it needs to be. It's our responsibility to keep our citizens safe and healthy and provide basic services. And you guys are responding to hundreds of calls a day, and it blows my mind. I mean, we could kind of go through our work day and kind of unaware of all the things that you guys are doing on a day-to-day basis to really reinforce the health and safety of our community. So I just appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. White?
Chief Man, thank you so much. What a incredible job you do. What a wonderful team you have. Appreciate everything. Let me ask you a couple of questions. You had your chart that said most common call types. You had one category called investigations. What was that? The third from the bottom.
Yeah, investigations, sometimes we'll get an unknown call type where the caller doesn't really know. It's I think I see smoke, but I'm not sure. So that we basically call that an investigation call type. That also encompasses some of our fire marshals' calls, right, Cameron, that are encompassed in that as well. When they do, a check in occupancy for a complaint, basically, somebody calls in and says, we believe there's a fire code violation or a blocked exit, that they go check on it. That would be an investigation.
I loved your chart about inspections. Do you have a dedicated staff that does a lot of inspections?
Yes, we have Fire Marshal Giordano's area. He has 4 deputy fire marshals. They are law enforcement officers also, so they do arson investigation, fire cause determination, and inspections. But they're very busy with. They also do all the plan reviews for life safety equipment in buildings. So they're very busy doing all that. And then we have one civilian fire inspector that really just focuses on his job is just to do inspections, especially some of the low level inspections. That he really focuses on. And I will tell you, he is phenomenal. We've had him for about a year and a half, and he has done more individual inspections than we've ever seen in the past. So doing a phenomenal job. That's why I really think that division currently is hitting on as many cylinders as they can. I just don't think there's any additional capacity within those resources, but they're doing a phenomenal job.
That's great. Commend him for doing that. If I counted correctly, how many ambulances you have? 5?
5 full-time,
Five
and then our peak ambulance that's in service 5 days a week, 12 hours a day.
Will Station 7 have an ambulance?
Yes, sir. It will have an additional. The plan right now is to take that peak ambulance, and then it will become a full-time ambulance. So that
Gotcha.
will be a 6th ambulance. So we will still remain with one station that doesn't have an ambulance, and that's Station 4 at the airport.
But your statistics show that having that added one could really help. So even though we put that one on Station 7, we still might need to have that added one in there.
Correct. The peak ambulance is very, very effective because we're really targeting. It's a surgical approach to targeting that time of day when we know we have the biggest influx of call volume. Also, that happens to be the time of day if we have fleet issues. If we need oil change, tires change, things like that. It always happens during the day as well. So our capacity is impacted both ways. So,
What is the lifespan of a fire truck?
12 years, and this is a fleet question. It's really based on, they have some models that they use based on hours, service costs, maintenance costs, hours, things like that. And they put it into a program they have, right?
Yeah,
depreciation model.
after they've completed the depreciation, what do we do with our old fire trucks? Do we give them to smaller cities? I'm sure
we
they're
typically
still.
we'll keep them again replace them about 12 years. Then we put them in our reserve fleet for
Gotcha.
about 3 to 4 years, and then they go to auction and we replace. So when another one comes in, we just keep cycling them that way.
Perfect. Great job, Chief. Very good. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to speak quickly on how we determine these, and it's more of a total fleet thing, but just something for people to know. One of the things we have done over the past few years, one as a response to everything crazy that happened on ordering vehicles holistically, but also garbage trucks and other things that are critical that we see break down. We put more money towards the ability to kind of pick out the lemons and other things that are having repeated fleet problems. So sometimes people are like, hey, replace these faster. What we did is we just put more money into the system. The program that was referenced is where our fleet folks use it to kind of weed out bad vehicles so that they can replace ones that are constantly needing work and attention. Because obviously if you just replace them, there's some vehicles that last 12 years and they really are fine. And then there's other ones that just, again, they seem like they're always being a problem. So just as a note for council, over the past few years, we've injected more money into that budget to allow us to eliminate more of those kind of problem vehicles across the fleet.
Mr. Wright.
I just have one question. We were talking about sort of getting those overall numbers down and ambulance response times, and I think that is overall efficiency based, right? And I like efficiency things, and so I'm just curious, right? This is actually a real question here. Short of adding another ambulance, how do ambulances get more efficient without losing quality of care? I'm genuinely curious.
How do they become more efficient?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I will say there's a couple areas where we could increase our, maybe, I don't know if efficiency is the right word, but we can increase our level of care that we provide. We have phenomenal protocols that we follow. Our medical director, we follow all of the protocols that he works with us to establish. We're following national best practices. The one area where, and you probably saw it recently on the news, Robertson County has started whole blood. That would be the one area, if we were going to expand to really be the premier tip of the sword, it would be to begin whole blood, carrying whole blood on our ambulances. That is really important in those very rural areas where it's a long transport times and you can't always get a helicopter in. We do have a very robust medical system here, so we're not that far away from good quality hospitals if we need it. But when a victim's trapped in a wreck and they need whole blood and it's going to take 15, 20 minutes to get them cut out before we can even begin the transport, there is a need for whole blood in that case. That's a big step. It would take a lot of pieces to make that happen, and that may be a future goal, but takes a strong partnership to make sure that blood is rotated so that it doesn't go bad. You have to have a partner agency that you work with. So it would be a big step, but it's kind of a future thing that we would like to look at.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I was not accusing you of not being efficient.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious as to, like, short of adding another ambulance, it's like, what could you possibly do to be more efficient short of adding another ambulance?
So Chief can speak to this, but I'd say you're going to have to add ambulances, but it's also geography. So
Yeah.
when we have more of them and they're places, so if they're not all having to be used, the chances if we have more of them placed around that they're closer to where they need to get to.
Sure.
And then the other one that I think is, again, expert can speak about it, but our folks work in conjunction with our medical system. So the closer it is that they can get someone to the level of care, really fortunate that in our city we have good medical care, but that's really important too, because if they have to get them to a higher level of care or they have to wait with them, that ambulance is out of service.
Yeah, I guess we didn't really utilize freestanding ERs as much unless necessary, correct? So like the closure of Caprock does not affect our...
Really has not affected us.
Yeah. Oh man, I was just going to ask one last question about that. But moving a peak ambulance to a new fire station theoretically shouldn't affect response time because you would think that would be responding to an area of high need. That's why we're building a...
Correct.
Right, so we shouldn't see too much of a change, not negating the fact that a peak ambulance is still
We're not
probably
taking
required.
that unit out of service, we're just adding it, plus the additional time that it's out of service, it'll be in service. So, yeah, we shouldn't
Right.
see a decrease in efficiency. However, I will also say that peak ambulance that we do have in service, we strategically also put it at Station 1 that already has an ambulance, because when we looked at the call volume and the heat map during those particular times of the day when the units are being utilized most, our greatest call volume was in this kind of downtown area.
Right.
And so that's why we put 2 ambulances there during that peak time of the day rather than putting it out at Station 4.
Right. With like leads of 3 years, I guess we would be assuming that within the next 2, we'd probably work a peak ambulance into the budget, I suppose? Or is that too far ahead
So-
to think about?
No, it's not too far. I mean, we think about
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to go maybe into the specifics here, but we talk about very specifics of where you're going to slot those things in and where we're going to get to, because you do have to think that far ahead. The other thing I was going to point out, just as again, for people listening to understand how much work goes into being efficient, when we first proposed the 5th peak ambulance, there was kind of this sentiment or question like, hey, you've got a firehouse that doesn't have an ambulance, so that's where it's going to go, right? And we did not put it there, because where we put it is where the data shows us that it is going to be most effective. So again, we're going to have it at Station 7, which is, there's, a lot of growth and stuff in that area. But as we look to future peak ambulances, and one of the reasons we do peak ambulances is because of efficiency. We don't have to staff it full time. It also gives our folks opportunities for overtime, which is really good, keeping our folks working in our department. But then if you go back to the graph, what you see is you're doing really good at the peak ambulance, but when it goes full-time is when you see that thing plummet. So I would actually hope that what we're going to see is some reduction. But then you have to go back to the same thing that Chief said, is if we see hot spots that are not served by that geographically, that's when you program back in that peak piece. So I think we will always be on that model. I hope we're always adding a peak, and then when we need another one, we go full-time.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to jump to a different question because I feel like that one was answered. Sorry. It just popped in my head. Going back to sort of how we talked about how the number of calls have gone down since we've kind of negotiated with our sister city. Do you know what percentage of time they come to College Station to pick up, to do EMS runs? Is it still
Yes.
pretty lopsided?
I mean, it is, we really are very rarely going to Bryan, and they're very, very rarely coming here. I would call it a very fair and equitable relationship at this point. Yeah.
That is good to hear.
Mr. Smith?
Sure. I am impressed with the professionalism of the fire department, the police department as well. It's just hard to fathom what a wonderful job y'all do. And then all the way down to the citizens of College Station making a most efficient use of our ambulance service instead of, they don't call unless they really need it. I mean, that's just, we have a culture of quality in College Station.
I concur completely. It's very indicative of the community and speaks highly of the community itself as well.
Well, thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I'm sorry, just one more.
Mr. White has another question.
I'm sorry. Do we have a good relationship with A&M when it comes to our EMS system?
Very good.
Okay,
yeah.
so we're working very closely with them on.
In fact, most of it is staffed with our personnel as extra employment. So, yeah, we have a really good working relationship with them. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Chief. I don't think I need to add any more questions.
Okay.
They've all been very good. I would just add one point that Mr. Wright talked about getting more efficiency out of our ambulances. I would say another factor to think about, and that's all public safety response, is connectivity of our roads and streets, and that's one of the reasons I keep harping on the idea that we need to make sure we've got connectivity and that we're keeping our eye on the future connectivity that's going to be needed down the road. So their response time depends on being able to get from here to there without having to go 14 extra miles. So I think that's another part of efficiency out of the equipment that we work on that a lot of other departments are involved in. I appreciate very much the report, the update, all of your senior staff being here to answer some of your questions, although I must say you covered 98.7%, is that about right, guys? Of the questions. Chief, thank you very much. I will indicate that we've been on this for over 2 hours and we're still in the workshop. We have one more workshop to go, and all of the regular agenda items I've got to declare a 5-minute recess.
Oh.